All right, our next speaker, see if I can pronounce this right, Dagur, Valberg, Johannsson? All right, come on down.
For this presentation, I'll be talking about the BIP100 proposal. It's a block size scaling proposal that lets miners adjust the maximum block size cap by votes. It's not a new proposal. It dates back to 2015, around the time when the scaling debate really started to heat up. So I worked together with Tom Harding in XT and Jeff Garsick, who originally wrote this proposal, to get it up to date with the recent developments and to revive it. So, who am I? I'm Dagur. I started working as a software developer in 2006 while I was studying for my master's degree in computer science. So I wanted to contribute to the scaling efforts of Bitcoin, and I started Bitcoin development as a hobby back in 2015 when XT added BIP101. So, what is BIP100? I'll start by giving a brief introduction to the proposal. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may need to be reminded of it. I think it's a fairly simple proposal. So, every block mined is a vote. It's a vote for the maximum block size limit. Miners can vote for an increase, a decrease, or to keep the current limit. If a miner does not explicitly add a vote to the block, it will imply a vote for the current limit. Then every, 2016 blocks, the votes are counted up. So this is the same block period as in the Bitcoin difficulty adjustment, and also I think in BIP9. And for a size limit to change, 75% of the votes must either vote for increase or decrease. Then the new limit is applied immediately to the following blocks. Okay. So we made this website, BIP100.tech. You can go on it now if you like. It follows the votes live. There are not so many votes now, but you can see. I think the website captures the concept well, so I've copied the main visual component of it, and I'll walk you through it. So here you can see that 2016 block window, or approximately 2 weeks worth of votes. Each cell represents a block, and each block represents a vote. And the blue votes are keep current size. The green votes are let's have bigger blocks. And it's also possible to have yellow votes, meaning decrease the block size. Currently, it's not possible because there is a lower limit of 1 megabyte in the proposal, so you cannot decrease further. Some are unhappy about that. yeah. So you must reach 50–75% for either bigger blocks or smaller blocks for there to become a change. And if we get a change, it's limited to a 5% change for every vote period. This is to add predictability and economic stability to the changes. So, the motivation or rationale. Well, miners, they feel both the positive and negative effects of the maximum block size cap that they enforce on themselves and enforce on other miners. Larger blocks allow for more growth in the on-chain ecosystem. Smaller blocks reduce the resource requirements network-wide. Also, the miners do work as an efficient proxy for the rest of the ecosystem because they are the ones getting paid. also a bit of personal motivation. It would be really nice to have a long-term solution, one that doesn't need human intervention. We shouldn't have to need to talk to each other at all. That's the best. Also, when we finally get this issue out, we can start focusing on more fun stuff, because there are a lot of fun stuff to develop, a lot of potential. So, BIP100 and emergent consensus, how does it fit together? If you think of BIP100 in the terms of emergent consensus, it's just another size policy. You have some clients have strict policy, a static size of 1 megabyte. Others clients have a user policy. You can set your own limits, like in BU and Classic. BIP100 clients, they will choose their limits by observing the network. And they will follow the 75% supermajority rule of the minor votes, and they will enforce a 5% change. Some clients, Bitcoin Unlimited and Classic today, they signal their excessive block, meaning how big blocks they accept currently. This is not a requirement in BIP100, but in our implementation of BIP100, we also signal this limit for the benefit of the network. So miners signal it in their Coinbase transaction. Other nodes on the network can signal it in their user agent. So what's the benefit of fitting into the emergent consensus and the concept? There are no changes required to other big block clients on the network. There is a high number of nodes deployed already, so you don't have to install the new software everywhere. And you already have a lot of hash power backing this concept. So it's much easily deployable than just making something completely new. I'm just going to go into a bit more details since we have time, right? So how are votes added to a block? A vote is just a string, and it looks like this. You know, BIP100 B8 means a 8 megabytes block size vote, and the miners add this to their Coinbase transaction. Coinbase being the first transaction in the block. The only miners can add this transaction, and it's the transaction where they claim their reward. And we already have some voting on the main chain. So, like this. Real example. Emil, I think he's maybe in the crowd, I don't know. CG of Bitcoin.com, he claimed the first modern BIP100 vote. So, the first characters here, seemingly random characters, are encoded block height, followed by the pool comment, pool's own comment. And here's the vote. He voted for 2 megabyte blocks. Here's the excessive block signal. And he has also a accept depth of 6, which I'll not go into. So when does BIP100 activate, or how does it activate on the network? It activated in the past, so it's already active. Activating in the past is possible because the default vote is keep current limit, and activating in the past makes the implementation easier because we don't have to test activation across reorgs. We don't have to make more advanced activation criteria like BIP9. We just consider it active today. Activating in the future would not reduce the risk of split anyway. The growth potential, assuming that the miners continue to vote up all the time, we can reach 2 megabytes in 30 weeks, 4 megabytes in just over a year, and And so, yeah, so on. The bigger the block size, the bigger the potential increase per vote period is. A capping at 5% was added to make it more predictable and economically stable. For example, a miner can't vote in one vote per period, force the block size to go from 32 megabytes to 1 megabyte. They have to take it gradually. So you won't suddenly have a massive increase in mempool queues and unpredictable fees. Another example, a miner can't suddenly triple the max block size, causing much more resource requirement on the nodes on the network. It also has to change over time. As a bonus, I find it easier to implement the code when you actually know an upper boundary. But BIP100, it's old, right? It's 2 years old. Was created and published by Jeff Garzik in 2015. And it actually had up to almost 60% of the hash power backing it back then. So I asked him, what happened? Why don't we have this already? And this is his reply. I'm just gonna read it. So 2015 was when Bitcoin Core put the brakes on any hard fork. The Scaling Bitcoin conferences were launched to, in theory, discuss how to resolve a contentious hard fork, to choose between BIP100, BIP101, and etc. The solution presented at the second Scaling Bitcoin conference in December 2015 was an abrupt departure from any base block size increase at all. It was SegWit and no hard fork at all. So we had these two scaling conferences, and we didn't really get any scaling. We got distracted, and BIP100 never got implemented. So let's not stay distracted. Let's try again. It did get some criticism, though. Some think miners get too much power. Well, giving this power to developers doesn't work at all. And unlike developers, miners have a big incentive to keep the network healthy. They benefit directly from it. Another criticism was that minority of miners can veto any changes. Yes, they can. That's what a supermajority is. I think it's a valid point, but on a positive twist, it means that a minority of miners can effectively stop any changes if changes are happening too fast for them to follow. If blocks are getting too big for them to hang on, then they can veto it. And another point was it's not predictable enough. So some of the parameters in Bitcoin are very predictable, far into the future, like the money supply. You can always tell how much money supply there will be like 5 years from now, even 10 years, well, even more. Some think that capacity, on-chain capacity should be the same. And BIP100 does not offer this. But we have a 5% cap, so it's at least, you can tell over some time what the capacity is. Yeah. And at any rate, BIP100 is more predictable than the current state of the network. Now we can't even properly estimate fees for our transactions to get into a block within a reasonable time frame. Yeah. So it's not perfect, but it's much better. And if it turns out to be a bad idea, it's always reversible with a simple soft fork. Just enforce the upper limit to be less or equal to the current limit, and reject any blocks that try to vote for a decrease. So effectively, BIP100 will be removed. But is BIP100 even relevant We have SegWit2x, and we have a user-activated hard fork, and even more proposals. How is BIP100 even relevant today? Well, when I submitted this proposal for presentation, we were at a full halt. Emergent consensus didn't have enough miner support. SegWit didn't have enough miner support. There was no compromise on the table, no UA SF and no UA hard HF. So things move fast, but thankfully BIP100 is a simple proposal and it can be combined with both of these solutions. So if SegWit is activated, we just replace size with weight, and we start to vote on block weight. If user-activated hard fork is activated, we just bump the block size up to 8 megabytes. We add these new nice additional features: quadratic hashing fix, replay protection, and force a big blockhead split, and then continue from there. So please run BIP100 today. It's merged into Bitcoin XT. It exists as a pull request on Bitcoin Unlimited, and we also have it ported to an old version of Core, pre-SegWit version. Thank you.
All right, let's go. I'm going to go way to the back. All right. There you go. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi. Outside of the block size limit, there is a second limit that would prevent having actually a block with many transaction units. It's the SIG-OPS limit, signature operation. Mm-hmm. I was wondering what BIP100 plans to do with SIG-OPS.
It does the same as Bitcoin Unlimited, so it's fully compatible with emergent consensus.
Thanks. All right, anybody else? All right. Oh, here, got you.
Hi. It's a fascinating proposal. Have you considered why not using a dynamic block size like is used in Monero, where miners can choose their own block size rather than voting, and that is limited by reward penalties, so that miners will only increase the blocks when there are actual transactions to be mined.
I'm not familiar with this proposal, so I don't really have a good answer for you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I ask a short other question? How did the voting work? You had a string called B2.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. A lower number means.
No, you actually vote for. Where's the mic? Oh, there's the mic. You actually vote for the size you want. But you're capped at 5%. So B2 means I want 2 megabyte blocks.
Okay.
So it depends on the current limit, if that's an increase or a decrease.
Okay, so you vote for size is interpreted by the client as higher or lower. Okay, thank you.
So, question: if for instance 75% votes for an increase and 25% doesn't vote, can you predict of these 25% which will actually accept the new size and which one is not compliant with it, because there's no signal that you're actually using this if you're not voting, right? Let me clarify. Say 75% votes for an increase and 25% doesn't vote at all. Can we predict which of these 25% will actually follow the new limit and which one are not using this?
Do you have no guarantee for that? No. It's an honor system amongst miners, I suppose, the same as BIP9.
So thank you for that. I have a couple of questions. I think my criticisms you summarized quite well. Or the criticisms match my criticisms. So firstly, with the design of BIP100, why is no vote counted as the existing limit as opposed to no vote, which would solve your problem? But why is no vote not counting as no limit at all? And then if 75% form, we have a cartel at the moment where 100% of miners support a cartel to force fees up, but BIP100, why give miners the actual power to manage a cartel and force those remaining 25% to limit the block size so that they could, how does a cartel break the artificial limit set by miners if you apply BIP100?
Sorry.
So the problem we have now is a 1 megabyte limit.
Yes.
And 100% of miners support that limit, and we have a Nash equilibrium where no one can win by breaking from that cartel. So the cartel is in place, and miners enforce that cartel. Now, if we employ BIP100, we're not removing the problem of creating mining cartels that limit transaction capacity. And my question is, why give miners the vote to vote in a cartel and not give them the power in a free market environment to break from a cartel?
Perhaps someone else can answer that.
Does anyone want to try? Oops.
Yeah,
Anyone got an answer for that? Okay.
Yes, I mean,
There you go.
so I think I have kind of an answer for that, because I think there's basically like Bitcoin works as a cartel all the time, right? Like the majority of the mining power has to be honest, so like it's an honest cartel, like the whole operation of the network is an honest cartel, and I feel it's kind of unavoidable to always have some kind of cartel basically like defining what the operation mode of Bitcoin is. I mean, if you decide for a bigger block size, it will be a cartel deciding always. Like I can't see any alternative to that.
Once they've broken the limit, once there's no limit, there will be. Once the limit is broken and there's no cartel, then they have to cooperate. But if someone wants to break from the cartel, people have to follow the majority.
My answer to that would be then the cartel would be basically not limiting Bitcoin. The cartel would agree to not limit Bitcoin.
Right. Well, good discussion. Oh, okay. We'll make this the last one.
In your list of objections, I was missing one: the way to rapidly respond to the market, because essentially, if we have a large growth in the demand, we can see that right now, because you showed us that we're going to reach 2 megabytes in quite a long time, and obviously the market would demand a faster response, and this would not be able to be met with BIP100. Do you have any answer to that? Did you consider that?
I personally would think that any response you can do with BIP100 is faster than you can do with agreeing in a room with the other miners to increase the block size limits. And anyway, you should always keep the block size limits high enough so you can respond to a demand. You should not always have the block size box full, preferably.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.